Today's question: why did PMI completely change the PMBOK guide 3 times in 8 years? By the end, you'll be able to navigate the evolution from the process-heavy 6th edition to the principle-driven 7th and understand how the 8th edition finally integrates the best of both worlds. I'm PM Panda, 25 years in project delivery across 3 continents. I've had to tell a board we were broke with 40% of the work left to do. I've watched good managers crash projects because they tracked the wrong number while the house was on fire. I'm here to make sure you don't repeat the same mistakes that have haunted the industry for nearly a decade. Imagine you're running a massive tech rollout for a global logistics firm and you follow every single step in your handbook. You meticulously fill out every template, check every box on the stakeholder registry, and file your reports exactly as the old books told you to. On paper, you are a hero, but in reality, the project is a total disaster because the software doesn't actually do what the sponsor needed by the time you finally finished. This is the frustration of doing process for the sake of process, and it's a pain point I've seen ruin careers. You've put in the hours, you've stressed over the documentation, yet the end result is a system that nobody wants to use. This happens because practitioners get so caught up in the mechanics that they forget why the project exists in the first place. The frustration really peaked during what I call the process era of the 6th edition. Back then, everything was organized into 10 knowledge areas and 49 specific processes. If you were building a bridge or a massive data center, this felt comfortable because it gave you a specific recipe. Take these inputs, use these tools, and produce this output. While it started to incorporate some agile content toward the end, the fundamental structure was still a rigid, sequential standard. In a stable world, that's great, but in a global market that changes every 15 minutes, it started to feel like wearing a suit of armor to a track meet. It was heavy, it was stiff, and it made it nearly impossible to pivot when the environment shifted because the guide assumed you could predict almost everything from day one. The problem with the 6th edition mindset is that it turned project managers into process zombies. I've seen teams spend weeks perfecting a risk register for a project that was already fundamentally flawed in its business case. People were so focused on the sequential nature of the knowledge areas that they missed the forest for the trees. This prescriptive approach created a culture where following the plan was valued more than delivering the result. If a requirement changed, the rigid change control processes often became a barrier to success rather than a tool for it. It was a time when the paperwork became the product, and that is a dangerous place for any professional to be if they want to stay relevant in a fast-moving industry. Then came the 7th edition, and it was a complete shock to the system that I called the principle shift. PMI essentially threw out the knowledge areas and moved to a principles-based standard. Instead of telling you exactly which documents to file, it introduced 12 principles and 8 performance domains focused on results. It characterized project management as a system for value delivery, which sounds lovely in a boardroom, but it demanded a holistic, value-oriented mindset that many veterans struggled to grasp. It was like going from a detailed cookbook to a philosophy book about the essence of flavor. You were told to focus on value and engage stakeholders, but the concrete mechanics of how to actually manage a budget were stripped back. This 7th edition era led to what I call the identity crisis of project management. I've sat in meetings with junior teams who were completely paralyzed because they were told to just follow the principles but didn't have the templates or processes to actually execute the work on Monday morning. They knew they needed to focus on value, but they didn't know how to formally document a scope change or track a complex schedule without the old process groups. It was a beautiful vision of leadership, but it lacked the ground-level instructions that keep a project from turning into a chaotic free-for-all. Practitioners were left wondering if they were even allowed to use a Gantt chart anymore, leading to a lot of confused teams and frustrated sponsors. Now we have the 8th edition, which is essentially the industry admitting that we need both a compass and a map. It refines those 12 fuzzy principles from the previous version down to 6 actionable principles to reduce overlap and stop the confusion. These principles are your mindset. They are the fundamental truths that guide your decisions when things go sideways. Instead of guessing which of the 12 principles applies to a specific conflict, the 8th edition streamlines them so you can quickly ask if your action is truly contributing to the delivery of value. This shift is about moving from what to do to how to think, ensuring that every move you make is actually pushing the project toward a successful outcome. The big news in the 8th edition is the return of structure through the 5 focus areas: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. These aren't rigid phases you do once and forget. They are logical groupings of 40 non-prescriptive processes that you can dip in and out of as needed. Think of it like a professional toolkit where you choose the right tool for the job. You get the structured mechanics of the past integrated directly into the performance domains of the present. This means you can have a formal process for assessing and implementing changes while still maintaining a principle-based focus on the overall value. It's the balanced integration we've been waiting for, providing both the why and the how. To navigate this new world, you need to master a few key terms that aren't just academic jargon. First is the value delivery system, which is the big picture collection of all strategic activities an organization does to reach its goals. Next are performance domains, which are groups of related interactive processes critical for delivering that value. Think of them as the different engines running your project simultaneously. Then you have the focus areas I just mentioned, which group your inputs and techniques logically. Finally, there is tailoring. This is the most important skill for a modern manager. Tailoring is the deliberate adaptation of your approach, governance, and processes to fit your specific environment, ensuring you aren't overmanaging a simple task or undermanaging a complex one. Let's look at how this works in a real-world scenario involving an international hospital construction project with a budget of $500 million. Imagine you're the lead manager operating under the old PMBOK 6 mindset. You have a rigid schedule baseline and a very strict change control process. Midway through the project, a major shift in the local community's healthcare needs occurs, requiring more intensive care units and fewer administrative offices. Because you're focused on the mechanics, you might ignore this shift because it wasn't in the original scope and would mess up your on-time metrics. You finish the hospital perfectly on schedule and under budget, but it's the wrong hospital for the people who actually need it, making the entire project a waste of capital. Now, if you tackled that same hospital project using the PMBOK 8 approach, you'd blend the mindset with the mechanics. You use the focus on value and adopt a holistic view principles as your internal guide to realize you need to pivot immediately, but instead of just winging it, you apply the concrete assess and implement changes process within the governance performance domain. You formally reallocate $50 million from the administrative wing budget to purchase 20 additional high-tech ICU beds. You're using a structured process to make a value-driven decision. You end up delivering a facility that actually saves lives while keeping the financial records transparent and the stakeholders informed. That is the power of blending the principles of the 7th edition with the processes of the 8th. Here's what most people get wrong after 25 years of me watching these transitions. First, don't fall into the trap of believing the 7th edition was a mistake or that processes ever truly went away. It was a necessary evolution to get us to focus on outcomes. Second, don't think the 8th edition is just a sneaky return to the 6th edition's rigid, sequential ways. The 5 focus areas are not phases, they are overlapping domains of activity that interact dynamically. If you try to treat initiating as something that only happens once at the start of a modern, fast-paced project, you're going to fall behind. These areas are flexible and meant to be used throughout the entire life cycle of the work. The final mistake I see is ignoring tailoring or treating it as an afterthought. Many people try to force all 40 processes of the 8th edition into a tiny project that only needs 5. This is highly relevant for professional certification exams, which now heavily test your ability to adapt the framework to the situation. The exam isn't testing if you memorize the processes anymore, it's testing if you know how to integrate principles and performance domains with traditional focus areas for the best result. In my experience, the best managers are the ones who know exactly which processes to throw out to keep the project lean and focused on value. If you can't justify why a process is being used, it's probably waste. PMBOK 6 was process-based, PMBOK 7 shifted to a principles-based system for value delivery, and PMBOK 8 finally integrates the two using 6 actionable principles and 5 flexible focus areas. Modern project management requires you to blend the leadership mindset of your principles with the professional mechanics of your processes. Your actionable next step is to review your current project today and identify one process you are doing blindly out of habit, then tailor it to better align with the focus on value principle. If this breakdown helped you make sense of the PMI evolution, hit like so I know to keep the content coming. Subscribe if you want to see practitioner lessons every single week that help you lead projects rather than just managing paperwork.